Good to have you with us on this Wednesday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Well, the people obviously want something different. And it ain't Michigan for Hillary Clinton. The map is just amazing. If you take the map of Michigan, it looks like almost complete rejection of the Clinton campaign and total acceptance of the narrative that Bernie Sanders has put out in front of the American people. Now, is this a game changer when it comes to delegate numbers? It certainly is an enhancer for Bernie Sanders, but it's not a game changer. Hillary Clinton is still in the delegate driver's seat. There's no doubt about it, but there's a lot of states left. It was interesting to contrast last night the arrogance and pompousness of Donald Trump, and then Bernie Sanders comes out in less than 3 minutes. He says, thank you, and of course he recognizes the heavy lift in Michigan. I mean, folks, how do you go 20 points down 2 weeks out and then win? And win from the very beginning all night long. And the big counties of Wayne County, Macomb County didn't come in for Hillary Clinton. Not the way they should have. And so if you want to put it in perspective, where would Hillary Clinton and the campaign be for them if they didn't have the African-American vote right now? You can go to my website and see 10 things I have to say today about all of this. I think that Hillary Clinton made a big mistake by doing the automobile loan program and trying to pigeonhole Bernie Sanders as being against it. Michigan voters just didn't buy that. That was a real strategic mistake. And then yesterday, on Tuesday, the day of the voting, Robbie Mook, who was the campaign manager for Clinton, is on with Wolf Blitzer, and he throws that crap out again. They're still telling the lie. And I think that Michigan voters said, you know what? This trustworthiness is an issue. And I think if I'm in the Clinton camp right now, I'm pretty concerned that there's going to be a lingering effect into Ohio, trying to say that Bernie Sanders was on the wrong side of history and did not want the automobile program to go through and get a bailout to the auto companies that were on life support because of the government help. And I think that voters are smarter than that. And so did he vote against it to start with? Yeah, he did, because Wall Street was involved in that. But when you pare down the package and it was only the automobile workers and there was no bailout for the fat cats on Wall Street, Bernie was right there when the money was on the table. And I think you don't have to sell his credibility with working families in this country. So I think it was a political strategic mistake on the part of the Clintons to go down this road that he wasn't with the automobile workers. And it also is a sign of nervousness on their part. And also to say, well, we got to wrap this thing up so we can turn on the Republicans. How weak is that? The other thing is the gun manufacturers. Do you know how many firearms are owned by citizens of Michigan? It's one of the highest states in the union when it comes to gun ownership. And to try to legally blame the manufacturers for any of these mass shootings isn't going to work. And it didn't fly with those folks. The rural map is heavy for Bernie Sanders. And I think that there's a firearm connection there. And when it comes to infrastructure, it was front and center. Every time you think Flint, you think infrastructure. Who in the United States Senate has talked more about infrastructure than Bernie Sanders? So all of these cards just didn't line up for Clinton, even though she won the state in 2008. Now, the big question is, how does this play in Ohio? Well, I'm going to be in Ohio on Monday and Tuesday because I am so politically curious to hear something on the ground. What we saw in Michigan was that Bernie Sanders made some ground up with the African-American vote. He increased his percentage. Hillary Clinton did not increase her percentage when it came to younger Americans who were out there voting. Bernie Sanders won like 85% of those people under 30 years old. Now, if those dynamics play out in Ohio, you know what we're going to have? A nail biter, too close to call, a photo finish. And then what? Well, proportionate delegates, it would be a good night for Hillary. But sooner or later, this is going to turn. Bernie Sanders is on a roll right now. And these super delegates are going to be challenged. This whole methodology of delegate dishing out is going to be challenged at the convention as long as Bernie Sanders continues to win. When we come back on Ed Schultz News and Commentary, I'm going to visit with Jonathan Alter, longtime friend, political analyst, MSNBC, and author. We're right back. Stay with us. This is brought to you by PillPack, Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, the iSafe team. We're right back.
Hey folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegotid.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.biogreenclean and order today.
It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
The Rust Belt results, always interesting. Trump got a chunk of it, and so did Bernie Sanders. This is a state that Hillary Clinton won in 2008. I'm sure all of you have read all the reviews and checked all the demographics, this, that, and the other. But moving forward to Ohio, does Michigan really mean anything? I want to talk with Jonathan Alter, MSNBC political analyst and author, good friend. Jonathan, good to have you with us.
How are you, Ed?
Good. Let's talk Republicans first. Is there any way, or what do you know, or how do you see a path forward for the Republicans to derail Trump at the convention or to coalesce? They keep talking about that, but they have this huge worry that Trump is not going to do them any good in the long run. What do you know?
Well, first of all, nobody really knows anything. That's been the big lesson of the year. Look at what the polls told us about Michigan on the Democratic side. They were way, way, way off, not a little off, but completely useless. On the Republican side, I think there's a 90+% chance that Trump wins the nomination without breaking a sweat, really, and that he actually goes over the top well before they meet in Cleveland. There's about a 10% chance that he goes in short enough, maybe 200 delegates shy, that the delegates would be released on a second ballot to vote for somebody else. But it's not clear that the Republican Party will tolerate nominating somebody who hasn't won the primaries. So, my sense is that Trump, if he was short by some delegates, would cut some kind of a deal. He's a famous deal maker, and still be the nominee. And that when people get closer to power, they, suddenly their qualms about somebody, their philosophical objections go away. Look at what happened in the last debate when, Marco Rubio called Donald Trump a con man. A con man. That was the quote. And then at the end of the debate, he asked, well, would you support Trump if he was the nominee? And Rubio said, of course. And think about what that means. He just said that he would support a con man to be president of the United States with his finger on the nuclear trigger. But that's what happens when these guys are politicians who, want power, want influence. And so at a brokered convention, Trump would just say to Rubio or, one of the others who has some spare delegates, he'd say, well, you're going to be my Secretary of Commerce or whatever. Rubio doesn't have a job. He's leaving the Senate.
Yeah.
So one of those guys will say yes, and Trump will be the nominee. I see it as increasingly unlikely that he can be derailed. What really worries me and something that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, Ed, is how many Sanders voters will vote for Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton on trade?
On trade, I think trade is important. There's no question about it. And I think it had an effect on Michigan, and it may have an effect on Ohio. But Bernie Sanders, if he is the nominee, is going to be able to tell the country that there's going to be conservatives that are going to be put on the Supreme Court because that's what Donald Trump said. I think that's going to get a lot of people's attention. He's also
when Hillary's the nominee, I mean, that he'll say that to get people to vote for Hillary against Trump.
I think the ammunition against Trump is that he will put conservatives on the Supreme Court.
Right.
And I think that the majority of Americans don't want that. And I think that that might be as big as trade because it'll affect more people. The other thing is healthcare. I mean, the other day, Donald Trump put out his healthcare plan, and I'm going to focus on this tonight on my show. A page and 3/4 of 7 bullet points. That's his healthcare plan, and he wants to repeal Obamacare, and of course, that will leave millions of Americans with pre-existing conditions, including my wife, out there with no insurance. That affects millions of Americans. So on those 2 points, I think that Trump has got a real uphill battle that I think any Democrat, a Hillary supporter or a Bernie supporter, would coalesce around and fight against. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the stakes are really, really high for personal security in this election.
Right.
And
I totally agree with you. I just hope that there aren't some people who are so embittered about elites, so embittered about their job having been shipped overseas, that even though they tend to be Democrats on issues like health care and Supreme Court, they realize at some level that Trump is a clown, that they might be seduced by his anti-establishment message, which is more in line with Bernie Sanders. I guess my point is I don't want to see the Sanders supporters, who are almost certainly not going to prevail, even if Sanders surprises everybody in Ohio and Illinois, because these are proportional states. Hillary still picks up a lot of delegates, as she did in Michigan, even though she lost. So Hillary, mathematically, it's very hard for Sanders to win the nomination. And what I'm wondering, and I want to make sure, is that the Sanders supporters don't get too embittered when he finally loses. I think it's a great thing that he's going to be in it till the end. He'll raise all those issues. He'll make Hillary defend herself. That's all good. It's good for Democrats. It's good for Hillary. And it's good for Bernie supporters. But I just want to make sure that at the convention in Philadelphia, at the Democratic convention, that those Sanders supporters, even though Trump's position on trade is closer to theirs than Hillary's, that they don't, desert Hillary.
I don't know. I think there's enough big issues out there where there's not going to be broken noses in that regard. I don't. And I think that I guess I would professionally disagree with you on as long as the door is open, you never know what's going to happen in California or New York, for that matter. I mean, you could make the case that Hillary's racking up these delegates, but if she didn't have the African-American vote right now, she wouldn't be where she is. I mean, she has got a problem with young voters, young Democrats.
No question.
And so I think there's a lot of room to play here from here on out. That being said, I think the issues are big enough to hold the constituency of Democrats and independents together to realize that the narrative against Trump is going to be, are you really going to trust a Wall Streeter? Are you really going to trust this guy? Does he have any track record whatsoever that he's going to bring the Wall Street barons into line for fair taxation and corporations parking money offshore and Citizens United? How does he feel about Citizens United? He hasn't even talked about that much. So I mean, he's talked about
some other things, like he said, quote, wages are too high, unquote, in one of the early debates, because he comes at it from a business perspective. And then he has talked in appealing ways about, corporations going overseas to avoid taxes, and in a tough way he says he'll do something about it. But at the same time, he's proposed insane corporate tax reductions and individual tax reductions for the wealthy, who he believes are overtaxed, not undertaxed. And so I agree with you, Ed, that when that kind of thing comes out, when Trump's positions on those issues come out, even if he's trying to run to the center, which he's going to do, because that's, he's a skillful politician. Even when he runs to the center, he'll be able to do that more successfully than Ted Cruz would have been able to.
Yeah.
He still is going to get nailed on some of these positions he's taken on taxes for the rich and health care and other things.
Okay, and there's one other thing that I think that is going to play into here that strategically would be good for the Democrats, is that I think that if it's Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, they could make a commitment to the Employee Free Choice Act. That would hold a lot of those independents and Democrats and unions together that would not vote against their own best interest, because I don't believe you'd ever get Trump to agree to address that issue. That is something that didn't happen during the Obama years because of the economy and the automobile bailout and the stimulus package and the health care lift and everything else. The Employee Free Choice Act it fell by the wayside once the Chamber of Commerce got involved, and it was just too big a lift to get that. They weren't able to do everything. But right now, to hold, because I don't think that Hillary or Bernie could defeat Trump without union involvement. Their social networking, their ground troops, their organization is just too strong. And this is why the AFL-CIO has not endorsed anybody from the executive council, because they don't want to be caught in a position where they'd have one of those two candidates that would not favor them on things that they're going to need if they're going to engage in the election. So there's a lot of dynamics to play out here yet. And I just think that this is politically fascinating what we're seeing, and nothing short of any of that.
Why, Ed, has Bernie not brought up the Employee Free Choice Act?
Because he hasn't had to. I'm seriously, he has not had to do that yet, and that would gum up the narrative right now. There's going to be a time and a place for that, but keeping it simple and direct and focused, I think, has been his forte throughout all of his campaign.
Well, that makes the Michigan results even more interesting, because what it means is that Bernie is in this to win this. He's going to be in this all the way into June, and that gives him time to raise that as an issue. I think if he raised it as an issue, Hillary would be forced to endorse it in a strong way, not a tepid way.
And it would not be hard for her to do that, because she supported it in the past, but she hasn't made it an issue now.
Right. So if it became an issue, then, when and if she's president, it would be closer to the top of the agenda. But for that to happen, Bernie has to make it a big issue and get off of the banks a little bit and make that an issue, the way he did it with trade in Michigan very successfully.
It's hard to get off of something that the people are on. The people are on this break up the banks. They're on this income inequality.
But he's got to walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, he's too much of a single issue candidate right now, and he would do better in terms of reshaping the Democratic Party if he developed a few other issues.
I think he's more than that. I would disagree with you on that.
John, he's not single issue. I exaggerated that, but he has two or three issues, and I think you got to rotate the crops a little bit in politics.
Well,
since he's going to be in it for a while longer, I'd love to hear him stress some other issues as well.
If he wins Ohio, and who knows what's going to happen after the polling we saw. No one can figure out the polling in Michigan and what happened.
It was crazy.
So I don't know what's going on here in Ohio. You don't know. I'm going to be there Monday and Tuesday because I'm so curious about what I might hear on the ground. And he could
win Ohio. I would not be surprised. I think Hillary will win Illinois.
Well, there's a soft underbelly there too, Jonathan. Hillary Clinton said in the last debate that you can't have resources decided on what zip code you come from.
Yeah.
Well, I guess why was she so silent when Rahm Emanuel was shutting 50 schools in Chicago?
Yeah, but they're not a lot of votes on that. Remember, Rahm Emanuel got reelected after shutting those schools. So
After he spent 3-1 on Garcia, they're true.
I think it'll be fairly close in Illinois, and I think there are a lot of Bernie supporters in Illinois. But I think at the end of the day, I'm from there, and I think the configuration of political forces there tends to favor her. But Ohio, Sherrod Brown endorsed Hillary, but his politics are much closer to Sanders, and he's a very popular politician there, and I think his endorsement is less relevant than his political profile, which is similar to Sanders. So Sanders could win Ohio.
He could. He could. I'm not convinced there's political forces out there with the mood of the country. Al Franken and A.B. Klobuchar, popular. No effect on Minnesota. Bernie wins.
Right. I don't think the endorsements matter at all.
Yeah, and the same thing with Stabenow in Michigan on the Democratic leadership team in Michigan.
Right. Nobody cares. Voters don't care about endorsements. The reason I mentioned Sherrod Brown is that his politics are more similar to Sanders than Clinton.
That's very true, and he's endorsing Hillary.
Right, he endorsed Hillary, but there are a lot of Sherrod Brown voters. He won big when he ran for re-election.
Sure.
There are a lot of Sherrod Brown voters who voted for him who I think are going to support Bernie Sanders. So I think Sanders has a very decent shot in Ohio, but it's not winner take all on the Democratic side. This is a critical fact. So Hillary, no matter what happens, she'll keep piling up the delegates next week.
Here's my final comment on the whole thing analysis. I have issues with the mainstream media, the corporate boys, but here's what I think. Bernie Sanders is going to bring the mainstream media to their knees to talk about jobs and trade, something boring that they don't like to talk about.
Yeah, it'll be a good thing. A good conversation to have.
Jonathan Alter, always good to visit. Thanks so much.
Great talking, Ed.
You bet. PillPack brings you Ed Schultz news and commentary. I want to tell you, I recently discovered PillPack as a full-service pharmacy that takes care of absolutely everything. And, they pre-sort and deliver all your medications and vitamins in easy-to-tear packets. They come in a box. They're labeled with the date and time and each dose, so you don't have to worry about antiquated Monday through Sunday pill box, which, of course, I used to have. Their pharmacists are available 24/7. Now, you want security? Pick up the phone. From the privacy of your home, you no longer need to have those awkward pharmacy encounters with somebody standing behind you and everybody knows what kind of medicine you're taking. And they proactively call your doctor to manage your refills so you never have to run out. And they are competent, believe me. There's no extra cost beyond your standard copays, and it's compatible with most major insurance plans, including most forms of Medicare Part D, which, of course, is important to every senior. Now, when you sign up for PillPack, they make sure that your insurance is compatible before they transfer any of your medications over. So there's not going to be any gap here in service. Switching is pretty easy. I've been through it. I did it. I can tell you it is. You sign up on PillPack.com. That's pill, P-I-L-L, pack, P-A-C-K, PillPack.com. And they just take care of everything. I don't know how else to explain it. You won't believe how much better your life is and how much simpler all of it is with PillPack. Do it today. News with Ed tonight on RT America. Get it on Dish and Direct. You can watch it right on your iPhone at RT.com. I think I look better on this anyway. Have a great one. We're back tomorrow.